Better than none.
To say a couple of remarks before we begin. Number one, beautiful translation from the Balboas of the key passages we need. Thank you immensely. All of these passages are footnotes to the Evans-Vance translations of the four Tibetan works, principally two.
Book of the Dead and Book of the Great Liberation?
You should have one and one. This other curious thing is a dialogue. It's really autobiographical. It's kind of, everything in it is true, except those parts that's not.
Only the names have been changed to protect the innocent.
And Barbara said, what do you mean by true?
Yeah, that could be it.
Yes, other announcements?
Just a bit of housekeeping. I said it once, but more people would come. There are ceramic coffee cups on the table in there, and there's little stickers that you can write your name on if you would be so kind as to claim a cup for the weekend and yourself, and then that will eliminate some extra unnecessary things. What else?
The lights as they come.
We had a surprise that came yesterday. Right? That's not Aaliyah's surprise, not 6 pounds, 7 ounces, 18 inches, smiling. Great state of mind, both of them. Everything worked out perfectly. Couldn't be better.
Very nice.
Yeah.
I don't know if they're going to see the
Got it? Good.
All right.
Jared?
Foster.
Watson?
Foster.
Foster
How
and
do you do?
Celeste.
My pleasure.
John from LA, huh?
Yep.
Good.
So,
All the way.
I'm just wanting to make sure they can see the two flip charts. Okay, then you know what? Why don't you come back here?
Actually, there are also...
Yeah, I think that
I'm going to bring another chair.
And then I can just kind of here to. Oh, that one.
Most of these are empty, I think. Yeah.
Oh, well, we're excited to see.
I'll take that.
I was trying to get you in from this end. I was
All
going...
right.
But there
All right, good.
I'm a front row kind of guy.
Well, it's, yeah, Pierre, you can have that place. Here, Pierre.
So yeah, make it, use the...
Oh, somebody else is sitting.
Good, right there.
So you just take the big word there.
Oh, we'll be right here.
Okay. Here, Pierre, I'll move over.
Yeah, there we go.
For aid.
And here's the document you used to watch occasionally. Here it is.
So, everything in the dialogue is true, with a few slight adjustments for a little bit of more continuity, really continuity. Therefore, we can have a lot of fun. Pardon? What would you like to offer?
I said, you can use this space. There's your space.
How can I use space? There's nothing in it.
Then don't use it.
Well, you can put your notebook there. Anyway.
That's
You
it.
need it.
So, Let me start out with
There is one there is. Also there isn't. Our black ones is French with honey cheese when it's black. Oh, we did when they do like birds,
start from the beginning. The goal of this seminar is to try to show that all there really is philosophy. In the realm of the mind, there's only one kind of philosophy, totally consistent within itself, and therefore our goal is to try to demonstrate this. So what will we have then? We will have a rational or intellectual, in the highest sense of the word, intellectual, spiritual philosophy. That's where we're going. Now we distributed these little pads for you. Write down any questions you have or things you wonder about that you'd like me to go over, or stop, raise the question on the spot. Either way is good. But I don't want you to lose anything you're considering, especially that you wonder about. So how shall we begin? Fundamental notion that we're going to explore This is fundamental. And the expression, as you know, that describes this is that wonderful Greek word, Ousia. Now, that's often translated as essence, but we're going to avoid that. Why? In the very nature of reality, reality is a dynamic, vital, total insight into itself simultaneously with the joy of that insight. Therefore, this is the nature of reality. The following words are: the intellect turns about itself and is intellecting. And at that moment when it turns, it then encounters itself, and that is the intelligible. Now, another word for this very profound insight is that you are encountering the nature of pure beauty in itself. At that moment, it's coming to know itself. But the dynamic is also, and especially described in Plato, as most of you, thank goodness, have discovered. That moment, therefore, is an encounter with the most beautiful, luminous light of being. Now, why the word being? See, when it turns upon itself and knows itself at that moment, then it discovers the nature of reality. Another word for reality is being. This is also can be said to be pure being or pure reality. Now, we're now going to see if we can use 3 words. This is the most beautiful, luminous light of being, also called divine luminosity. Now we're going to go 1 to 2 steps into metaphysics. Very simple. As you can see, this presupposes something. Metaphysics is going to try to describe what are the conditions for whatever it is that you see in the realm of the mind. What is it? It's whatever the condition must be present for something to take place is the step into metaphysics. For this to take place, right, by necessity, there's a union here, right? There's a union. There's a union of the intellect, intellecting, a word I made up, and the intelligible. But that presupposes a unity. Right? It presupposes a unity. For if unity was not possible, you couldn't have union. And if you couldn't have union, obviously you couldn't have something that can turn upon itself and know itself. Why unity? Well, the whole of metaphysics now is going to depend upon one question. And once we fill that in, we can go ahead. Would you agree that whatever is or has any mode of being for whatever it is, there has to be a cause. Or equally well, condition for being. So if I have a match and I want to start a fire, the match is the cause. But unless oxygen and temperature and material that are combustible are present, you can't have a fire even though you have the cause, the match. That's the condition. So therefore, the condition for this to take place presupposes there must be some propensity in reality and in the nature of what is for unions to be. But you can't have a unity unless you have one, or the one. With that wonderful article, the, it transfers that in a magical way, whatever is an adjective into a substantive, and it gives it existence and exclusive existence. That's what that does. Ooh. That's beautiful, that's beautiful, that's beautiful. Oh, is there the beautiful? Oh, does that mean there is beauty? That's what this does. Therefore, this is also called the good. Because all aspiration, whatever it is, presupposes good. You only do what you think. Whatever you do, no matter what it is, because you think it's good. Therefore, the ultimate good upon which all other goods depend is the good. Now, this is all we need. This is all we need. So I'm going to use it in a minute, but first, any points? Go ahead, sure.
When you say unity, I don't know, but it implies to me that there are parts. You know, unity of something unified.
That's right.
You know what I mean?
That's right, it does. Yeah. And you see, the question is, we can make these distinctions without there being differences. Therefore, you can have distinctions without differences. Therefore, I can have an idea of unity. I can say the unity of all of these terms together, that's the nature of reality. Or I can say, in that experience, one is reaching out and touching truth. Now, I'm making all these distinctions, but they're not differences. Right? Try it again. Must you not say that in this divine luminosity experience, that there is something that must encounter it?
Sure.
And it is a seeing. Can't call it an eye that sees. So we postulate something. Intellect is the eye of the soul that sees. But intellect isn't separate from the process of intellecting. It doesn't stop. It is a vital dynamic, therefore it's intellecting the intelligible. Therefore all of these three are in a dynamic unity. I'm making distinctions, no differences. Therefore I can put all of these words together and I can say they fit in a unity, not physical, metaphysical. It's good to have a girl like that around. She just pick up tables and walk around. I was thinking maybe someone could have sat on it and pick her up.
This term intellect is quite different than the way we use.
Pardon me?
This term intellect is quite different than the way we use intellect now. Of course.
That's right. Just in the now. Thank goodness that's the name of the place. Yes.
How about outside the now?
Yeah, this is a now, and we can move into the fact that it always is, regardless of the country, the nationality, the time. This experience is open to mankind, and it's always the same, though they may describe it slightly differently. Therefore, it's something that always is. But what always is, another word for what always is eternity. Therefore, For this to exist, it presupposes there must be a positive quality in the nature of reality of that which always is, because that's the condition for this. Therefore, what always is a definition for eternity. Therefore, the nature of eternity must precede this. Notice now, we're talking just with this model and we're creating all these terms. That's all we're doing. And in one way, we're just talking about one term.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear what you were referring to when you said always is, because you pointed and I didn't see what you were pointing to.
Well,
What presupposes eternity is what?
it is,
And what
exists.
and something presupposes that? What presupposes?
Would you say this is something that's timeless?
Right.
We mentioned, did we not, that it can be experienced in a wide variety of places and times, and it's always the same?
Okay.
Therefore, it has the eternal aspect to it, does it not?
Right.
I took the word eternal and I said, now watch, it's not just, yes, it is eternal, but that presupposes, if it always is, the idea of eternity. Why? Because the idea of
Always is.
a Greek word for eternity.
Eternity. Okay. I thought you were pointing to something else. So.
Okay, that's okay, right. Now look. What we're going to say now, by the way, as you all should know, this is sometimes called the idea of the good. Capital I. And this word should never be used because it's a Greek word and it means to behold. So if you behold the good, that's the experience of divine luminosity. So we may use the word idea out of popular usage, but we're not thinking of it as a concept or some thought in one's mind. Now, now what we're going to do is see whether or not there is a corresponding term in the Tibetan for each of these ideas. And then we're going to see what kind of language they use in describing it. And then we're going to talk about the possible unity or union. We're going to use all of these words, and especially union, unity. So therefore, going to add one more. These are two major ideas, but in Plato, he has these two, and he says one more thing. To make that intelligible, you need one more term. That's all. 1, 2, 3. Therefore, this is going to be a triad. versus a duad. That missing term is going to keep the Tibetans from being a rational philosophy. With the introduction of it, we have to see that that's the term that can render intelligible the entire thing. What are the implications? Where we're going? To make the point we're making, we're going to need some good translations, especially on the nature of the soul and the metaphysics, and that's going to come from Plotinus. And you have with you this evening those wonderful translations of the Balboas. So we're going to use the translations of Plotinus that the Balboas have made for us to render intelligible the nature of the soul. And in doing that, we are then going to see the positive qualities that follow, and when it's absent, the difficulties that must equally follow. So where shall we get this? Now, there are many now different translations of the Tibetan Book of the Dead. And I, of course, as you will find in the dialogue, I studied with Lama Chada in 1952, 3, 4, 5. 1953, 4, 5. Who's an amazing teacher and a great man, a great human being, for which I owe a great deal. We spent all our time with just 2 books, Tibetan Book of the Dead, Great Liberation, and then we sneaked every once in a while in the Milarepa. So those were the works we had. Now, just in honor of him, he was 80 at the time when we met. There were only 3 of us in the class, and we used to pal around in San Francisco. And he's Japanese, and he was the 13th Dalai Lama's teacher. So I said to Lama Chada, I said, hey, yeah, I mean, you know, how did you get there? He said, my master, I went to master, and I said, Zen Buddhism is dead in Japan. And he said, then go bring it back alive. Goodbye. So he became a stevedore, got to India. And I said, how did you get from India into Tibet? So, a bowl. He begged his way in. I said, how did you get through Bhutan? Because at that time it was very primitive and a good number of bandits. He said, oh, bare ass, no one rob you. So he got to Tibet, became the 13th Dalai Lama, and in honor of the whole thing, he spent many years there. They gave him a complete set of the Tibetan Tripitaka. And that's what we also studied and worked with while we were up there. So in any case, all right? I could tell you some stories about him later, but they're all fun. Especially one, he loved to go into secondhand shops all along Mission. In those days, Mission had a whole bunch of them. And he'd pick something up and say, oh, why did you get rid of this? I said, oh. You know, why do you get rid of this? They pick up great pieces of work, you know, wood models of different kinds of machinery, exquisitely made. They say, why did you get rid of this? Anyhow. And, Guy, I'll end with that. So, we got into the Tibetan Book of the Dead Inventions translation. It was the only translation available. And we then stayed on this one problem. And let me acquaint you with that problem. Get into the dialogue, please. And Okay, if I can get you to page 4. I'm going to work out 2 models that are going to represent everything we've captured on this. And now that I have it, might be a good place to put it up here. Okay, good. I'd like to do the Tibetan first and then the Platonic. Therefore, if I can get you into well, in terms of the dialogue, it starts with the Platonic model, so I'll start with the Platonic model just to make it consistent. Now, let's get into the biographical side of it. I guess we start with page 3. And maybe if we get a couple of readers who want to play the dialogue. Bill?
Yeah. Sure.
Good?
Which one you want, Peter or Joseph?
Which role would you like to play, Bill?
I'll take Joseph.
I'll take Peter.
Okay.
What else you can do?
All right. And if there's any question, raise your hand. It stops the show, and then we can talk and then go back into the reading. It's going to take us maybe 3-4 pages. Okay.
Yes, some years ago, a small group, there were only 3 of us, and we were lucky enough to study and relate with Brahmatana. We pored over the Tibetan Book of the Dead and the Book of Liberation, as well as the biography of Milarepa. It was before Tibetan thought caught the fancy of the public. I was amazed to discover such depth of thought. And what topped it off was that in the Evans-Vence edition, he used Plotinus in his footnotes to explain Buddhist thought. As I recall, it was a double whammy. It really was.
Turn up the volume a little bit.
At that time, the passages he used from Plotinus I had read without really seeing the depth of them. Seeing it connected to Tibetan thought just woke me up. It also opened up a deeper meaning to the Platonic tradition that I had not been aware of. After that, it was fun getting into Tibetan thought and finding parallels in Hellenic thought.
Do I detect a mystery here? You speak of it lightly, and that betrays what you just might maybe keep it concealed. Shall I ignore it, or challenge you to reveal the full story? I say that because I think you did come to explore some difficulty or problem, didn't you? So shouldn't I raise as many questions as I can in the hope that it may clarify what lies behind your thinking? How can I do that if you approach this difficulty of yours with more caution than it deserves?
That is fair, even though I am not altogether sure that what I say will fit neatly into some gift package. However, as they say, I should go for broke. Well, two things happened, and I do not know if they are connected. If they are, I wonder why I hadn't seen their connection until recently. While studying with Lama Tata, I had a very profound, enlightening experience, encountering the divine luminosity, and it never occurred to me what his role in that experience may have been. Surely, relating to him did turn me around. I could say it matured my understanding, or it may even have contributed to my having that experience. Perhaps my failure to grasp it was because there was so much going on at the time that it crowded out such reflections. Indeed, if I took the time to tell you, it would take us off on a lengthy tangent. However, even with all that going on, a part of me was absorbed in the thought that if the union of the pure consciousness and the pure intellect could be experienced in a unitary experience, then the highest truth, the Dharmakaya, would be reached.
Let's see what that means. You had experienced one of the pair without the other, and you concluded your experience, as profound as it was nonetheless deficient, since you hadn't participated in its union with pure consciousness. I shall assume that the pure consciousness was considered to be infinite. Shall I also assume that these two highest states are equivalent to the one, and the most brilliant light of being in Platonic thought? Sure, I know that the luminosity is often called the idea of the good, but I don't recall reading that they are a pair in perfect union, What say you? Have you found it somewhere in Plato?
Yes, you know your Plato. He doesn't give it away. Take his notion of the good itself. To get it, you have to piece it together until you see it. You have to dig and find it, or you are left in the dark. Really, that is a major difference between these systems, since in one it is spelt out, simply and clearly, while in Plato you have to dig for it and puzzle your way to uncover it. At the end of his discussion on the allegory of the cave in the upper world, in the 7th book of his Republic, is where he presented those ideas. It is after he equates the sun with the last of all that can be known. Now the difference, I think, is clear, because Plato has presented those very ideas, the one of the good and the idea of the good, as the royal pair. If they are a royal pair, both king and queen, then they have a union in their royalty, likening them in their sacred realm as being akin to the sun and its light in the terrestrial realm. The image of a royal pair suggests that they can be regarded as sharing in a union while still being separate and functioning separately. He does not unpack that philosophical package anywhere else. However, I would like to know where you stand on this issue.
Could you explore that point further? Are you saying that they both express the idea of union of their most fundamental philosophical terms, but they function differently or ontologically? Maybe I should ask what kind of a union you see is present in each of them.
The image you use to describe these ideas is a royal pair, a king and a queen. And from that image, we can say they are separable and function both together and separately. However, we are concluding from the use of a metaphor and not from an explicit description, since he gives none. By contrast, the Tibetan is simple and clear, since it is asserted that these two are inseparable and in a union. Are we together on this?
Somehow my page got turned around. All right, yeah.
Okay, look. Platonic model, quite interesting. He has two ideas, king and queen on two levels, heavenly, earth. It's generative. As the one gives birth to the idea of the good, or divine luminosity, so in a similar way, what's quite astonishing is that he then repeats this divine luminosity is to the sun. Calls this the King of Light, and this, right, the King of Light and the sun itself. Now, this therefore is a mean analogy. A is to B as B is to C. This is the controlling analogy for the entire Republic. And it takes a bit of very careful reading to get the substance of it and to justify the conclusion that it is in the book. But it can be done if you get a good translation. I'll just make the reference to you. You can look it up later or borrow my text if you'd like. It's the first major conclusion in the allegory of the cave in the upper world at 517b. Right, Seventh Book of the Republic. The Tibetan. Now we have to be careful because we're going to have a lot of fun if we just read it very carefully. All right? Watch the language now. These obviously are a pair. And therefore, if I can get you back into the quote, yes, you know you're Plato. Could you read that once more for us, please?
Yes, you know you're Plato. He doesn't give it away. Take his notion of the good itself. To get it, you have to piece it together until you see it. You have to dig and find it, or you are left in the dark. Really, that is a major difference between these systems, since in one it is spelled out, simply and clearly, while in Plato you have to dig for it and puzzle your way to uncover it. At the end of his discussion on the allegory of the cave in the upper world, in the seventh book of his Republic, is where he presented those ideas. It is after he equates the sun with the last of all that can be known.
Okay. They're a pair, king and queen. There's a unity in the king and queen, a regal unity. They're separate. They function separately. Now we're going to move to the Tibetan. Keep going, please.
Now the difference, I think, is clear because Plato has presented those very ideas, the one of the good and the idea of the good, as a royal pair. If they are a royal pair, both king and queen, then they have a union in their royalty. Likening them in their sacred realm as being akin to the sun and its light in the terrestrial realm. The image of a royal pair suggests that they can be regarded as sharing in a union, while still being separate and functioning separately. He does not unpack that philosophical package anywhere else. However, I would like you to know where you stand. I would like to know where you stand on this issue.
Could you explore that point further? Are you saying that they both express the idea of union of their most fundamental philosophical terms, but they function differently or ontologically? Maybe I should ask what kind of union you see that is present in each of them.
Do I keep reading? I think if we're looking for the Tibetan one that's on page 3.
On the last sentence of the words. No, I
The image used to describe these ideas is a royal pair, a king and a queen. And from that image, we can say they are separable and function both together and separately. However, we are concluding from the use of a metaphor and not from an explicit description, since he gives none. By contrast, the Tibetan is simple and clear, since it is asserted that these two are inseparable and in a union. Are we together on this?
From my reading in talks with Buddhists, I do think that they regard the Dhammakaya as emptiness. They say it is that to which it is not possible to assign any predicates. So you are asking if that which is empty can be in a union with anything, or how can an experience of divine luminosity have a union with what is empty? Am I following your thought correctly?
You are following very well. Let me add something more to the puzzle. In the Tibetan, these two are said to be inseparable. As for Plato, the union of the royal pair must be taken metaphorically and not literally. For if they were an inseparable unity, they would be like Siamese twins. Now, what does that add?
Okay, let's hold it. I'd like to go back into the passage that starts, no need for that, since I have reflected upon it so many times. Got it?
That's forward.
There's a quote from the text.
More here.
It's on page 5.
Yeah.
Correct.
Second dialogue.
Oh, okay.
What I enjoyed reading and reflecting upon is that the following passage draws out its meaning. Thine own consciousness, all right, look here. Thine own consciousness, shining, void, inseparable from the great body of radiance, has no birth, no death, and is the immutable light, the Buddha Amitabha. And it follows with a way to maintain this state of the divine mind of the Buddha is recognize this is sufficient, recognizing the voidness of thine own intellect to be Buddhahood, and looking upon it as being thine own consciousness is to keep thyself in the divine mind of the Buddha. Take a few minutes, take a look at it. We're going to pull it apart and look at it again. Recognize this is sufficient. Recognize the voidness of thine own intellect to be Buddhahood. Looking upon it as being thine own consciousness is to keep thyself in the divine mind. Key term, they're inseparable. Now, as you reflect on it, do you see where we're going?
I was pointing out,
Watch. Can this language be used in this model, or can this language be used in that model? Because the terms we are saying are the same. Are these two separable or inseparable? Separable. Otherwise, it'd be Siamese twins. There is a union. Is it a different kind of union? The same word is being used. There's a union here, there's a union here. A pair has certain kind of unity. But if it's an inseparable union, is that a different kind of union?
The Dharmakaya and Sambhogakaya are separable yet inseparable from two different angles.
That's where we're going. That's where we're going.
And Nirmanakaya too.
Okay.
More like that.
What's my goal at this point?
Same.
Puzzle. Puzzle. Getting you puzzled. Okay? As for Plato, the union of the royal pair must be taken metaphorically, not literally. Perhaps we should take a look at the words a little more carefully. And therefore, we now are in that next paragraph. No need for that. And that's the paragraph we just read. Joseph says, very interesting summary. And thank goodness we can turn the page. Now we're going to use a word that's really important for us. So take a pause for a minute. I'm back here at this experience. Luminous light of being. Got all those terms, all those terms. Now consider all the terms we used a few minutes ago to describe that. And see, when the intellect, eye of the soul, turns upon itself to know itself, then at that moment of knowing itself, that is the intelligible. Now, that means the intellect turns upon itself to know itself. It discovers the nature of mind. Because in that experience, take all the great insights you've ever had, right? Put them all together. This is a moment of insight, a massive insight into the nature of reality. It's startling, vivid, right? Overwhelming reality to it. Right? You have to assign necessarily to it the idea of goodness, overwhelming sense of goodness. Now, in every tradition where this takes place, and in Plato there's several times he mentions it, with that experience, a new kind of seeing takes place with the mind. Sometimes they call it a new kind of understanding. Put these together, therefore, out of this luminous light of being, when it finds an expression, when it expresses itself, right? That's a logos. The intellectual understanding of this as it expresses itself through mindfulness is the logos. We're going to use this word quite a bit because there are different ways of looking at this idea of the logos. It's central to where we're going. Okay, any questions before I jump in? Sir?
You say the nature of mind is startling. It's like a surprise, what you're saying. Startling is like a surprise.
Do it more.
So there's a kind of recognition or something.
Yes.
Yeah, some kind of recognition you didn't have before you had this.
That word is very important, yes. It brings about a new kind of recognition. Yes. Mindfulness, yeah, recognition. Yeah. Sure.
So the logos is the experiencing of this new kind of mind?
It's out of that experience comes a more active participation in mind. That's logos.
That would be the equivalent of Rigpa in Tibet.
Pardon me?
That would be the equivalent of Rigpa.
Yes.
the resting and this awareness. So not just that, you're actually able to abide within that.
That's right. That's right. And it necessarily has a vitality and the quality of opening up different levels of understanding simultaneously. Now let's pull in one term and see the implications of it. The idea of emptiness. Idea of this pure consciousness is said to be emptiness or voidness. And now I'm on page 6. The top of the paragraph.
To begin with, I would say the idea that these two can be in an inseparable union creates a problem. For if anyone has experienced or has come to recognize either one of them, they would have missed the inseparable union of them. Clearly, they would have missed out on the more profound union of them, so that they would have yet another goal to reach in their spiritual journey. Further, it makes a curious claim, as if emptiness could be in a union with anything and still be emptiness.
I see you have an interesting way of going.
Yeah, that's good. Okay. Fine. Look here, try it. If this idea that they are in an inseparable union, they have to be together. So if someone experiences shunyata or emptiness purely, that's not the union. If one experiences divine luminosity and not pure consciousness or shunya or emptiness, they haven't achieved the union either. Therefore, if we are taking this to the way it's written, therefore we can say there's state 3, state 2, and the union of them, to inseparable union of them, has to be the highest, or the first state. 1, 2, 3. Therefore, if someone experienced shunyata, we would say to them, that's wonderful, you've had a great breakthrough. By the way, did you encounter divine radiance? No. Well, you've got something more to do. Oh, pure, brilliant light of being? Oh, yeah. Did you hit? No. Well, you have yet to get the union. Right? We're together? Yes? Yes? Good. Now, Joseph has a great line.
I would like it if you would fill me in on how you connect this Buddhism with the Platonic thought.
Right. I see you have an interesting way of going. I'd like it if you fill me in on how you connect this Buddhism with Platonic thought.
Well,
hold it for a moment.
Sure.
Right? You should be up with me up to this point before we now move into the other model. Good. No puzzles? You look puzzled.
I'm looking puzzled at the written word. First is union. Is that what you're saying? I got it. The way you're talking, it sounded like pure consciousness would be one, then pure intellect, and then union would be 3. But
I'm sorry to tell you, you're following perfectly.
not the way you're written.
Wait a minute. No. Wait a minute. No, the way I've written it. This is the union.
Okay.
These are the two things that are in a union. That must be said to be the higher.
I got it. Okay.
Therefore, separate. They're not in a union. Therefore, they would be subsidiary.
Right.
Good.
Got it. Thanks.
Or just making sure pure consciousness, emptiness, and voidness, that's all the
Yes.
same thing?
Yes.
Okay.
And that's called sunyata.
Yes, pure consciousness in this work, again and again, is equated exactly as I have it. Shunyata, or emptiness and voidness. Yeah. And all of those quotes come out of the Tibetan Book of the Dead and the Book of Great Liberation. If you want to look at them later, they're here on the table. Okay, got a couple of interactions, and let's proceed.
Well, you see that there is a possible way of reading Tibetan Buddhism along Platonic lines, don't you? Wait a moment. That is exactly what Evans Vent saw and contributed in his editing of that work. I hadn't appreciated the implications of that before. He is showing parallels between Tibetan Buddhism and Plato and Plotinus's philosophy. I hadn't thought of exploring that idea in that way before. Could he have shared this kind of understanding with the translators and that influenced them in their translation? Now that is a new one for me to puzzle over.
Okay, just to make sure, later the point is made that in all of the additional and new translations of this very passage, this idea of union is not there. And there's going to be a discussion about the meaning of that and the possible ramifications of it in a few minutes. Okay, all right. Joseph?
Say, Peter, what would you say if someone to ask if there is some connection between the luminous light of being and the Logos? What would you say?
Well, first off, I thank them for the question. It is a good one. For starters, I would say that the vision into the nature of reality should be called mind, so that inherent within that luminous light of being, there must shine forth the Logos. I'm not clear on how to proceed from here.
Good. New term. The Logos proceeds from providence. Well, now, we're talking about classic philosophy, of course, and pro-video, right? This is to see what is prior to seeing. That bestows a particular and that means unique benefit upon a subject. Okay, let's go back over it now. If there is the nature of reality, how does it manifest itself? Since it's a primary goodness, providence. What is providence? It's that power, intelligible power, that proceeds from the light, the divine luminosity, that is prior to the intellect, it's prior to any seeing. It always bestows a particular and unique benefit upon a subject. That's the very property of goodness that's discoverable from this experience. If one can then follow the implications of this through the Logos. Example. If it is possible to see that in every dream a person has, if it is studied just in itself without any interpretation, there is always a unique benefit fitting the subject, a goodness and insight which they hadn't anticipated, that comes freely to them, that not only is unique to them, but it fits precisely the moment they're in, their present. It draws upon one's past and therefore provides a new opening for their future. If that's the case for every single dream, then that's exhibiting, the dream exhibits the very power, intelligible power we're calling providence. Because if you can get something that's unique to you, that you hadn't anticipated, could never have thought about, comes to you unsuspected, yet it's primarily necessary for you to understand the difficulties you're having in your present. If it draws upon material of your own past and presents it in such a way for you to get an insight into the present and past that will release you from the difficulty and give you an opening for a different kind of future. That is a particular example of providence flowing through the Logos, through dreams. And we also find that same property is also in daydreams. Where is this? In Plato, Book 9, Plato's Republic, second page. And he also says, by the way, it also brings visions, so not just providential. Now, what does this mean, though? What does this mean? You know what it means? If it has this capacity, comes out of a goodness, the Logos therefore emerges, allows it to present itself intellectually for what is absolutely necessary to understand the present difficulties the person has, draws upon their past, shows the person the difficulties they had in their past they hadn't understood, which if they understood would unlock their present and allow them a different future. That's unfolding prophetic. That's prophecy. Rational, intelligible prophecy. If the Logos proceeds from providence, we can say that providence bestows upon subjects what is most beneficial to them. And we can say the Logos has an inherent, intelligible power that also brings a benefit to those who can participate in her. The connection then between the Logos and providence presupposes goodness. So it's the mean term between the two. Oh, this suggests analogies. Take a look, page 7. Take a moment out, please.
In the dialogue?
7?
7 in the dialogue?
You have the page?
Yeah.
I hope so. It should. So let's take a break. Right, take a break for a few minutes, and then we come back, okay? But I can get a bit of coffee.
Actually,